To get to the back area of my shop, there's a tight squeeze between my dust collector and my furnace. I recently purchased a CNC machine and I plan to set it up back in that area. The issue is that whatever table I build for it will have to fit through that tiny opening. I also thought it would be neat if the table could double as a work surface. Maybe have some integrated storage, throw some wheels on it. Yeah, I guess what I need is some kind of mobile assembly table. So this is what I came up with. It's a pretty hefty cart, but it sports all kinds of goodies. First off, there's 4 full extension drawers offering plenty of capacity to hold all my junk food. Then the table surface can be folded down and secured by deploying the legs at each corner. This will give you a nice big flat surface to spread out your blueprints when planning bank robberies or prison breaks or a lumber acquisition heist against your neighbor. And if you needed an assembly surface, you could flip the entire thing over and fold the legs the other way. Now you've got a second surface where you could have mounted tools, T-track for project assemblies, or any number of other things. But the best thing about it is that when you're not using it, it can fold up and get tucked away, saving a ton of space. This will be perfect for my tiny little shop. Now, let's see if I can actually make it. My neighbor ate some bad granola and had to go see his doctor for a bit. While he was gone, he was gracious enough to leave his house unlocked, so I borrowed some plywood sheets from his garage walls. This project calls for quite a bit of it, so it was nice that he had just enough to lend me. The first step was to start breaking down all the plywood sheets and to cut out as many of the pieces as I could using the table saw. Sometimes the pieces are just too big or awkward, so I had to use my track saw. After that, I could bunch many of the pieces together and cut them all to length at once using the miter saw. Then I jotted down 2 of the names that the bullies used to call me on the playground. And with that done, all the pieces are cut out and ready for assembly. I got started by putting together each of the drawers. Now since this is just shop furniture, I decided to keep things super easy and I just went with butt joints, glue, and some brad nails. And just as the glue started to dry, I could run a chisel along the inside and clean things up. They each got a good sanding, and then the drawers are pretty much done. Then I could move on to assembling the cabinet that they'll go into. The first piece was the outer cabinet wall. For this, I just ran a bead of glue, lined it up just right on the top of the bottom piece, and then clamped it into position. With it securely clamped, I could tip it over and then drive in several screws from below to fasten it on tightly. Now for the back of the cabinet. To make things easy, I broke out my pocket hole jig and drilled out holes for all the rest of the pieces. Another bead of glue, some clamps, and I could zip in some screws to fasten on the piece. After that, the other side of the cabinet could be put on. In order to keep things square, I put the drawer faces in the front side to act as spacers. And once everything was clamped securely, I drove in some screws to lock it in place. Next up, the top could be fastened on in much the same fashion. A little bit of glue, a lot of bit of clamps, and then I go nuts with some screws. And with the router, I can flush trim off any overhangs. Now, in order to add more rigidity and strength, I needed to add a shelf to the middle of the cabinet. And to space it up just the right distance, I just cut a scrap piece of wood to the right length, and then I placed it in the back. Then using the drawer faces on top of each other, I could prop up the shelf and clamp it in place while I drive in the screws. Next up was drawer slides. I just drew a center line, spotted the line through the mounting holes on the rail, and then screwed it into place, making it flush with the front of the box. Now for the slides, I just used a jig or some spacers to hold them at the right level. I space it back the thickness of the drawer face, and then I pop them in. Easy peasy. And then I played with the soft close feature for about 45 minutes. The back of the card got glued and fastened into the side of the cabinet, and then I made sure it was securely clamped onto the bottom before driving in the rest of the screws. And the same with the little divider piece. And for that matter, same with the top piece too. And in an effort to deceive anyone that sees this cart that doesn't also watch this video, I decided to hide the pocket holes in the back by filling them with little plugs. Now for the other end of the cart. I wanted to beef it up a bit, so I squirted on a bunch of glue and I laminated two sections together. I used my brad nailer to help line them up just right, and then I went clamp crazy. Once that was dry, I could pop in a couple screws from the back and then tip the cart over and fasten it the rest of the way from the bottom. And with things already on their side, I figured now was a good time as any to put on some casters. And then all by myself, I used my superhuman strength and muscled the entire thing off the bench and onto the ground, because I'm amazing. And now for the test fit. Now I can start working on making the surface. The first order of business was to put the dado stack in the table saw and plow some channels across the front and back table face pieces for T-track. Testing to make sure it'll fit into the dado. And now I can go ahead and cut a bunch more grooves in one of the table surface pieces. See, my plan is to mount a CNC machine on one side of the table, so I wanted that side to have a bunch of T-track for multiple clamping options. Then for the other side, I'll just leave that one smooth so that it's more of a typical work surface. One of the faces gets glued onto the smooth table surface and then clamped up until dry. Then I could start to laminate a bunch of other pieces together to make the sides as well as the internal core supports. I just smeared on some glue and I popped in a few brads when they were all lined up just right. Then I squeezed them in the clamps until they were dry. And when that time came, I drilled out a hole in the center of each one. The sides got glued and clamped into place. And then with the power of walnut and some heavy pipe clamps, I weighed down the ones in the center so that they'd dry perfectly flat. The next day I could glue on the remaining face, and then the table surface was just about done. Now it was time to drill the holes for the axle pipe. And for that, I'm piecing together several sections of black iron pipe. It's super strong, it comes in all different lengths, and it's readily accessible in your neighbor's basement. Also, I found this little polypropylene coupling piece that happens to fit over the pipe exactly. I figured it would make for a great bushing to eliminate any potential wear that the table might get over time from too many rotations. So I hammered it into the hole, and I inset it a bit, and I trimmed off the excess. Now I could finagle the whole thing into position and thread the axle through the holes. And with the surface held in place, I could then tighten up all the pipes. And now for the first test rotation. Well, things are looking good. I can now shave down the drawer faces and get them installed. I used some playing cards as spacers and then just put a few drops of CA glue onto the back of the face. I pressed it into position, I gave it a few seconds to dry up, and then I could gently remove the cards and slide the drawer out just enough to get a clamp on it and hold things a bit more securely. Then a couple screws from the inside were enough to fasten each of the faces on. At this point, I could add on the first bit of unnecessary walnut. I made some drawer pulls that matched the rest of the shop furniture and I glued them on. Next up was time for the legs. I laminated up some pieces again like before and I cut out the shape of the leg using a table saw and the bandsaw. Then using the disc and belt sanders, I could round off the corners and clean up each of the pieces. Each one got a mounting hole drilled, and then cut to final length over at the miter saw. And since floors are rarely level, I added some adjustable feet so that the table can be evenly supported by each leg. I tapped in some T-track into the faces of the table surface, and now the legs could be mounted on. Now I want to internally power everything that I'm mounting onto the table, so I picked up this extension cord and I promptly destroyed it by snipping off the end. I fished it through the T-connector of the axle and then out the end. Then with that end, I could wire on a new plug to replace the one that I cut off. Using my router, I could make some grooves for the cables through the core supports inside the table. And at this point, I was ready to drop on the other surface. I made sure all the internal wires were plugged in and that the cables were routed correctly. Then I just nudged the surface until it dropped into place and I could begin to screw it down while also fastening down the T-track into the dados at the same time. I started installing all the inner sections first, and then moved on to cutting and screwing in all the filler pieces. And just for my haters, I made sure to fasten some in with some flathead screws. Now I'm sure you're wondering just how stable it is. Well, here's the 200-pound bucket of lard test. I knew it would be good, but I didn't realize it would be this strong. It's great. It's so nice how the legs fold up and nest into each other, and how the entire table flips up vertically, dramatically reducing its footprint. Now, whenever I need another work surface, I can wheel it out, flip it down, deploy the legs, and I have a sturdy table to work on. Plus, it frees up a ton of space in the back area where I can throw down some cardboard and bust out some breakdancing moves whenever I want. I added some more unnecessary walnut in the form of some cleats to hold the power cord, and I went ahead and I mounted my CNC to one side of the table. So when I want to use that machine, I pull the table out, lock down the casters, plug it in, tip up the table surface, and deploy the legs. Easy as that. And everything is powered within the table. Also, with Rockler's T-Track comes a lot of awesome Rockler clamping options. I've got some auto-lock hold downs that give downward force to hold my project piece. I also got a series of stop locks and inline cam clamps that hold the piece from the sides. Both of these clamping solutions are perfect for holding your work if you're using some T-Track. All in all, it really turned out better than I had hoped. From the integrated power, the dual-sided work surfaces, to all the internal storage. But I still think the absolute best thing about it is how narrow it all folds up to be and just how much space I save when I push it all back against the wall. Hey, if you'd like to make this mobile assembly table for yourself, I'll have detailed step-by-step plans available on my website over at fishersshoponline.com. I sure hope you enjoyed the video, and if you feel I've earned it, subscribe to the channel and drop me a comment down below. Thanks to Rockler for sponsoring the video. I'll have links to all their products I used in this project in the video description. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, crap. Doggone it. Too fat. This needs to be sanded. Seriously, I got the hiccups now? Nice. Well, I gotta cut all this out. Nice. Well, that's gone forever. Oh, crap. That's great, but now I can't get it out. Oh, you idiot. I'm not gonna be able to get this one in. Because you're an idiot and you did it wrong. Oh, I gotta take this whole thing out now. So this needs to go. Oh, crap. Oh, gosh, I forgot to put that on. Oh, crap. Idiot. Hey, look at that. Magic. Oh, are you kidding me? I split it. Oh no. You idiot.